Thick is in as Democrat Joe Biden announces his presidential running mate. How Senator Kamala Harris's rise through California's political machine led to this historic choice. Hysteria and hypocrisy over something voters have been doing for decades. The Republican fight against mail-in ballots, even as party leaders cast their own. And is the time for education over? Local leaders demand more enforcement of COVID-19 health orders. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now.
Now on The Finest. In San Diego and beyond, Our Lady of Guadalupe has morphed in meaning and form over the past 500 years.
She can be a source of comfort. She can be a source of pain. Her power comes because she has all of these different facets to her.
Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the remote KPBS Roundtable today, Andrew Keats, assistant editor at Voice of San Diego, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma, and watchdog reporter Morgan Cook of the San Diego Union-Tribune. Donald Trump has been screaming in capital letters on Twitter and stating it to interviewers, especially those not likely to correct him. Quote, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. Why? Extensive use of mail-in ballots. Trump's false claims are echoed by conservative political leaders across the country, including here in San Diego. Joining me to explain what's going on is Andrew Keats, assistant editor at Voice of San Diego. Welcome back to the Roundtable.
Mark, thanks for having me.
Well, your story on this focuses on the election message mailed out by Tony Kavarik. He's the chairman of the Republican Party in San Diego County. It's kind of pulled the string and out comes Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. He certainly has the talking points and is following them to a T.
And really interesting here is you're reporting on the hypocrisy of it all. Guess who regularly votes by mail?
Yeah, so this was actually something I had come across before Tony Kavarik's press release. He had been tweeting for the last few months about the fraud that was going to be coming through mail-in voting, saying a few months ago that the whole process was fraught with danger. So I asked the registrar of voters for the voting records on Tony Kavarik, and I found that he had voted by mail in 22 consecutive elections. He has a perfect voting record. He has voted in the 24 elections that he has lived in San Diego for. The last 22 of those, he voted by mail. So I sent him an email and I said, can you help me reconcile your position that voting by mail is fraught with danger and your decision to do it 22 consecutive times? And then before responding to me, he sent out a press release saying that vote by mail was fraught with danger, and then included at the bottom of that press release a little section called background, in which he acknowledged that he himself had voted 22 times.
So he got that out in front.
He got out in front of that one. Yes, exactly.
Now, we should note that Tony Kavarik announced this week he's leaving his role as Republican Party chair in the county. So what was his response then when you pointed out that he votes by mail? Why is it okay for him and Trump and not everybody else?
Well, basically, he said that he is diligent about it, that when he votes by mail, he requests a ballot, he tracks it until it comes to his house, and once he sends it in, he tracks it until they receive it. Presumably, I suppose this is a level of diligence that he says that he does not believe could be afforded to the public as a whole. And so he says that vote by mail should be handled on a case-by-case basis. Is what he said in an email to me, and presumably that case-by-case basis would, in all instances, apply to his case.
Because it's so rife for the possibility of fraud. But isn't that just a lot of hooey? I mean, after all, multiple studies involving millions of ballots cast by mail in recent elections show no more than a handful of cases involving fraud, right?
Yeah, the attempts to find corroborated cases of voting fraud at all, mail voting fraud specifically, have repeatedly come up empty. Even the Conservative Heritage Project keeps what it calls a tracker of substantiated instances of mail voting fraud. It found one instance in all of California that was not in San Diego County. It was in an LA area where a city manager was sort of holding back certain mail ballots that came in and releasing only those that were seen as beneficial, and he was prosecuted. So, and that is the one case that has been substantiated in California by a very partisan effort to substantiate the concern in the first place. The straightforward academic attempts to substantiate it show that there just really isn't much evidence for it. And moreover, that the principles of validating mail ballots are basically identical to those of validating in-person ballots. As Michael Vu, the registrar of voters, told me, there's just no one is any safer than the other. They have very, very similar validation procedures, and it's just not a concern.
It's interesting news now that a federal judge in Pennsylvania has told the Trump campaign and the Republican Party they've got to produce evidence of vote-by-mail fraud by Friday. This was a Trump-appointed judge. So these lawsuits are starting to play out around the country. That was brought by the Democrats and the Sierra Club. But the extensive steps are taken, as you note in your story, to guard against fraud. Don't they check every voter's signature?
Yeah, they check every voter's signature. The signature that is on file when you register to vote is matched up against the signature that comes on the ballot when you mail it in. That's also the same thing that they do to validate your in-person voting procedures. Ballots that are sent out to people also have a unique barcode, so that if you say that you lost your ballot and you request another one, it's going to have the same barcode. You're not able to just request 10 ballots, fill them all in, and send them back and get them all counted. The system recognizes that immediately, kicks out all but the first one that comes in, and the registrar would follow up with you, in some instances even referring that action to the district attorney for potential prosecution if there was evidence of intentional malfeasance. And these are it's not that the system is foolproof. It is not that it's impossible for there to be a mistake or something along those lines. No system is without any error. The problem is, and what experts have found is, if there was systemic voter fraud, if there was some attempt to meaningfully alter results through a coordinated effort, there would be some evidence of it. We would see it not just in unique instances, but we would see it regularly. And instead, there just doesn't seem to be any evidence of that at all. Basically means the systems work, even if they're not completely perfect.
Trump said on Fox this week he will block Democrats' requests for aid to the Postal Service because that would facilitate mail-in balloting. Isn't he saying the quiet part out loud about sabotaging the mail vote?
Yeah, I think he sort of gave away the game there. You're supposed to say this is about preventing fraud, not disenfranchising voters. And the USPS, of course, has no distinct role in preventing fraud. They simply deliver the ballots to people's homes and then the completed ballots back to the registrar. Depriving them of money, I can see no way in which that would play into fraud.
Now, Trump is telegraphing that should he be ahead on election night based mostly on in-person voting, mail-in votes counted after Election Day should be discarded. But explain why California and other states with heavy balloting by mail, we had 3 out of 4 votes in the primary in this county sent in by mail. Why does it take so much time?
Well, because precisely these reasons that they use to prevent fraud. The reason mail ballots take so long to count, and the reason we spend so much time in San Diego and California for weeks after the election releasing, sort of frustratingly small batches of counted votes, is because they're matching up every signature to the voter file. That's the process that takes so long. That's the process that makes the system secure. And so there is a sort of contradiction in demanding that the results be in before election night, and also, sort of insinuating that the system is rife with potential for fraud, when it is precisely the lengthy process that is in place to ensure that fraud does not occur.
And that's why the media is being told by many experts on elections to explain to voters why this election night likely won't deliver results as we normally are accustomed to, because we're in a pandemic and we're going to expect more mail-in ballots all over the country, not just in places like San Diego County, which is pretty much used to this. Now, Trump claims a delayed result is evidence of fraud. What might all this mean for the post-November 3rd national debate? Put your crystal ball hat on here.
Well, I guess the short answer is I don't know. Here in San Diego and here in California, we have a long history of using vote by mail. We have a long history of taking a while to certify election results. I don't see any good reason that California would run into any real problems. Question is, what about a state or a county that has an official who is sympathetic to some of these claims? And then ultimately what happens if this becomes a legal matter and it goes before judges, and what those judges think about the question. So that all becomes very hard to untangle. I do think, though, it is safe to say here in California and here in San Diego specifically, I don't think there's going to be much room for this sort of monkeying around with the process because it's sort of old hat here. There will be some changes. There's universal mail voting for the first time here, as opposed to simply requesting a mail ballot for any reason. But as you say, 70% of people in March voted by mail. So moving from 70% to 100% is a difference of degree, not category.
Well, I'll tell you, it's plenty for us in the media here to stay on top of, and we're going to be doing a lot of stories on this as we move on toward November 3rd. I've been speaking with Andrew Keats, assistant editor at Voice of San Diego. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Joe Biden next week will be formally nominated at a Democratic National Convention like no other. A white guy heading a major party ticket is nothing new, but a woman who is the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India running as vice president, well, that's historic. California's junior senator, Kamala Harris, was Biden's long-awaited choice, and joining me to look at what that means is KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma. Amitha, welcome back to the Roundtable.
It's good to be with you, Mark.
Amitha, start with the impact of naming a woman as a running mate, especially a woman whose parents were immigrants. And you have a personal perspective on this as well.
I do. Well, first of all, I think that the impact will prove to be huge. And that's partly because Kamala Harris has this very rich narrative of living the American dream. As you mentioned, she's the child of immigrants who came here to the United States and achieved great heights. They really accomplished a lot. Her dad is from Jamaica, as you mentioned, became an economics professor at Stanford University. Her mom was from India. She was a cancer researcher, and she herself died of cancer back in 2008. Her mom and dad met as graduate students at UC Berkeley, and Kamala Harris has pointed out that her parents were both civil rights activists. And, since you asked, Mark, I'll just add this. On a more personal note, I'm also the child of Indian immigrants, and I remember reading a piece on Kamala Harris's win as DA in the early 2000s, and I remember telling my dad, she's going to run for president someday, you watch, and she might just win. And I remember him saying, that will never, ever happen. This country will never elect a woman to be president. And as you know, Mark, my dad passed away last fall, and I feel so badly that he didn't live to see this moment. I think he just would have beamed. But I did share the news with my mom, who has Alzheimer's. She has middle stages Alzheimer's. She got it. She understood how monumental this moment was, and she positively glowed after I told her.
Now, you were a moderator of a candidates debate that aired on public broadcasting stations when Harris was running for U.S. Senate in 2016. What were your impressions of her during that debate event?
Well, it's interesting, Mark. Our debate, I think, was her first as a political candidate for a non-prosecutorial position, because she had run for DA before that and run for state AG before that. And despite that, she was smooth during the debate at KPBS. She came across as tough, smart, experienced. Now, she didn't answer a key question I had about her investigation into who was going to pay for the San Onofre nuclear power plant closure and who should pay for it, and some shenanigans surrounding that. But that said, she had major presence on the stage. She was completely at ease, but forceful at the same time.
Now, progressives have long criticized Harris, especially during her run for president last year. A lot of specific cases there, but give us the overview. Liberals say she was unfair in several decisions involving wrongful prosecutions, and you wrote some critical stories for KPBS on that.
Yeah, the knock on her from progressives is that when she was San Francisco DA, she hardly ever prosecuted cops in officer-involved shootings. But she also took a ton of heat from folks, including, I think, Senator Dianne Feinstein, for not pursuing the death penalty against a man who had killed a police officer. I read a poll recently that said 87% of Bernie Sanders voters would support Biden. And I think it was something like 96% of Elizabeth Warren's supporters back Biden. And I believe their thinking is that the country will not survive another 4 years of Donald Trump as president.
So the reaction from Donald Trump to the Harris choice has been astounding even for him. He's being called a racist and a liar in a New York Times headline and lead, for example. Explain what's going on.
Well, this is all very familiar. I mean, from the moment Biden picked Harris as his running mate, Trump has been on a tear where she's concerned. He has called her angry, nasty, a madwoman. And then yesterday, the attacks on her took a turn, a familiar turn, when his campaign advisor retweeted a column written by a law professor questioning whether Harris was even eligible to be vice president because of her parents' immigration status at the time Harris was born. So now people who study constitutional law are saying anyone who is born in the United States is an automatic US citizen. And as you and I have discussed, Mark, over the years, this has a very familiar ring to it. Trump has been a birther for years. He repeated the lie that President Obama wasn't born in the United States and therefore it didn't qualify to be president. So we're back there again.
And finally, should Harris and Biden win in November, California Governor Gavin Newsom's going to have a big choice to make of his own, her replacement. He gets to nominate someone. Already a lot of speculation. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of funny. I think Newsom was asked by a reporter this week about whether people had already started asking him to put their names in as potential replacements for Harris. And he told the reporter, I think you're the only one who hasn't asked. Unless you just did and I didn't know it. So I think it's fair to say that there is a ton of interest in this seat. I think it will be difficult for Newsom not to pick a woman. Women are going to be reluctant to relinquish that seat to a man, but also there will be a lot of pressure on Newsom to choose a Latino. There are some names that have been put out there. Congresswoman Katie Porter of Irvine is one of those names. Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia is also out there. And then there is San Francisco Mayor London Breed, who is African American.
Well, at the risk of getting ahead of ourselves, Biden has also said if he gets a Supreme Court opening, he will pick a black woman. Maybe he picks Kamala Harris and somebody else moves in as his vice president. All sorts of things laying out there in speculation of things to talk about in the future.
Lots of possibilities.
I've been speaking with KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma. Thanks, Amitha.
Thank you, Mark.
Now on The Finest. In San Diego and beyond, Our Lady of Guadalupe has morphed in meaning and form over the past 500 years.
She can be a source of comfort. She can be a source of pain. Her power comes because she has all of these different facets to her.
Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Governor Gavin Newsom says California might be turning a corner after the recent surge in COVID-19 cases. Yet there's still plenty of dangerous behavior out there. People gathering in large groups without face coverings and businesses staying open in blatant defiance of public health orders. At the local level, city and county officials say it's time to give enforcement powers some teeth. Joining us to talk about these frustrations is Morgan Cook, investigative reporter with the San Diego Union-Tribune. Hi, Morgan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, you illustrated this conflict in a story out of Ocean Beach. What's happening there and why is the city so concerned?
So for several weeks, hundreds of people have been gathering on Wednesday night in the Veterans Plaza Park. It's this little park near the pier in Ocean Beach. And they've been coming sort of as an extension of the farmers market, but the farmers market has nothing to do with the action in this little park. And so they've had drum circles and fire dancing and very, kind of noisy things. Lots of people crowded together, not wearing their masks. And people in the residents who live there are not excited about it.
Now, the city tried to put up a fence around that park you're talking about, but that really didn't last very long, right?
Right. It lasted a few hours. They put a fence up, and then I guess one or more people who were, very frustrated about the public health issues just cut it down. And so there was a tense situation that unfolded when city council member Jennifer Campbell came to speak there and other city officials. There was a lot of shouting.
Jennifer Campbell, she's a physician, isn't known for being the most outspoken member of the San Diego City Council, but she put out an impassioned plea for people to take this more seriously. What was her message there midweek?
She was saying that it is time for the city and the county to get serious about enforcement because people have been openly defying the public health orders, whether it's this drum circle or at their businesses that are, staying open in defiance of the order. And it's sort of, that sort of thing is getting more visible. And I think that really worries Councilmember Campbell because, as a public health person, as a doctor, she is really worried that it will result in the virus spreading and it will cause more people to violate the public health order if they feel like they can do that with impunity. And then the virus will just spread more and we will have lost all of this ground that we've gained. Like our numbers are looking good, things are looking good these days. And I think that she as a doctor is worried about people's health and she's worried about losing the ground that we've gained, and she thinks that it's time to get serious.
And all eyes were on the OB Wednesday night when the next drum circle took place after that fence incident. Was there a noticeable difference? Did the city have to take any action?
The city was there. So city workers were there, county workers were there. A couple hundred people were dancing, together in the drum circle, but they weren't really doing enforcement. They were, asking people to wear masks, handing out masks, asking people to social distance, and they definitely reserved the right to hand out citations, but it didn't seem like they were doing that, or at least not on any sort of large scale.
Now, can the council step in and kind of back her play on this, standardize an approach to enforcement? Is there real power to get police to do more on this issue?
She told me that the council needs to take action, right? So they need to act to create a citation and then fix the fine that would go along with it. And so I think she was talking about, creating a citation at the city level, which would kind of force the issue, I would think.
Now, aside from these gatherings we've been talking about in OB, gyms have also been a problem. COVID-19 outbreak was linked to a gym in Pacific Beach, which remained in defiance of health orders. UT and other sources are reporting on gyms in University Heights and Ramona, where owners have stayed open in their defiance. These are businesses, understandably, they're afraid they won't be able to recover financially in all this. But is part of this also political, with business owners claiming government overreach?
Oh, I think absolutely, definitely that is the case. I mean, masks have become a political statement. It's sort of, politics have kind of invaded this whole issue that, at its core is a public health issue. But, the politics in it have sort of shaped the situation and made it, as tense as it is now, in my opinion, at least. And, the public officials are trying to walk this fine line of, trying to give people as much leash as they can. They're trying to make that possible while still trying to hold the reins, and keep it kind of pulled back. Because, I feel like it is totally fair for people to be really frustrated if everything they've worked for their business is just falling apart, and they don't see bodies in the street. Like, I get that. And I think that they get that too. But at the same time, if we don't protect everybody, nobody is safe when it comes to a virus like this. And other people want their freedom back. They want to have the virus knocked down. They want us to control it so that we can have more freedom back, and everybody can. So it's, it's difficult. It's a balance.
Well, it is. And that's getting at my final question here, which is about the frustration on all this. There don't seem to be unified rules, countywide rules. You got different cities, you got the county itself, the ebb and flow of the COVID cases. We hit a situation with a lot of outbreaks, and then things seem to get a little better. And why can't we loosen it up and get the businesses back going? We're just so fragmented, and it reminds me of a wartime, and where things are fluid and changing all the time, and it's very difficult for people to know the rules.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has been described as a war on this virus. And it, in some ways it acts like it. There are restrictions on daily life, which, it's hard for people. It's hard for me. It's hard for everybody, but it's important to slow the spread of this disease so we don't see bodies in the street. And, it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, we're going to, of course, see this play out in the last 80 or so days we have here in this national election and this national debate. And of course, there's elections throughout this county and cities and states and places across America. So I'm sure every community is dealing with this, and we're going to see the politicians and the voters weigh in come November.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been more happy to not be an elected official. And I'm usually pretty happy that I'm not an elected official, but now I'm really, really happy because this has just got to be so hard. I mean, it's so hard for everybody.
You pay the cost to be the boss.
Yeah, well, I would not want that kind of responsibility.
I've been speaking with Morgan Cook, investigative reporter for the San Diego Union-Tribune. Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me.
That wraps up another edition of the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Andrew Keats of Voice of San Diego, Amitha Sharma of KPBS News, and Morgan Cook of the San Diego Union-Tribune. If you ever miss a show, you can catch up on the Roundtable podcast, available on your favorite podcast app. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for listening today, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.
Now on The Finest, we examine an icon. Our Lady of Guadalupe has been a powerful symbol for 500 years, and artists have reimagined her as a source of resilience and pride. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.